For those of you who have done breath work before, I would like to encourage you to go into this session today without any expectations based on past experiences. Try to go into this with an open mind and an open heart and let it unfold naturally as you go through the process. For those of you who have not done a breath work before, I can't tell you what your experience is going to be. No one can. Every time you do a breath work, it's a completely different experience. But I can tell you based on past experiences of my own, what your experience might be. So what we're doing here today is we're going to be combining a structured form of breath with a very specially curated playlist of music to flood our bodies with energy and oxygen, thereby raising our vibrational level and bringing ourselves to a more open and transcendental state of being. Part of the experience is carried by the music, which itself will, through a process called sonic driving, impart upon the participants a certain amount of energy. But the majority of the experience is driven by the breath. As we stay with the breath and bring more energy and oxygen into the body, you typically will feel it start to gather in your hands and in your feet. And then as the energy moves through the body, it can come up against blockages. Those blockages may be physical, they may be emotional, they may be psychological, they may be spiritual. It all depends on the path you've taken through this life. And in large part, what a breath work is it's a chance to use energy as a tool to open blockages to the flow of that energy in your body. And as those blockages are opened and we're able to more thoroughly and holistically process energy, we're able to more holistically and thoroughly process the experiences of life. So when that energy comes up against a physical blockage, it's often related to a past trauma or injury in the body. So you may experience pain. It may be very similar to the pain that you had when you first had the injury. And the same is true when it comes up against an emotional blockage. You may find yourself crying. You may find yourself laughing. Not all blockages are negative. It tends to be that at the time you had an experience that you were unable to fully inhabit. And so rather than fully expressing it, you stuffed it away in the body. All thoughts and emotions are chemical, and they get stored away in our fascia. And as we let those go, we have another chance to experience and express them rather than stashing them away for later. It gets a little bit more complicated when the blockages are psychological or spiritual. But the process is very similar. We have a chance to process something that we could not process in the past. And we tend to relive an aspect of it. But something to bear in mind is nothing is going to come up that you're not ready to process and deal with. So often a breath work initially will be very cognitive. You'll be very aware of the process as it's going on. If you're doing it in a group, you'll be very aware of the people around you. And often the first several breathwork experiences are not profound because, frankly, you're just not ready for them. Sometimes you're dealing with pain in the body. Sometimes you're dealing with just trying to quiet the mind. There is a very heavy overlap between breathwork and meditation, especially transcendental meditation, which also utilizes tones and vibration. But when you do get past that initial cognitive hurdle, and the energy starts to move through your body and open up blockages, a number of things typically happen. You may find your body moving on its own. So your head may turn side to side, your shoulders and hips may rock back and forth. You may find your arms raising up over your head. All perfectly normal. When you come up and against an emotional blockage, you tend to have an outburst of tears or laughter or anything on the spectrum in between. As you start working more on an energetic or spiritual level, you'll feel a lot of vibration in the body. And you may even find yourself doing energy work on yourself, whether you're trained to do it or not. And then when you get to the more spiritual aspects of it, the sky's the limit. So this whole process is driven by the breath and the music. I've provided the music. You have to provide the breath. And it's a fairly simple process. And I think of it as being broken down into 4 parts. And we're just going to go through each in sequence. The first part of the breath is that it's all in and out through the mouth. It's a sheer matter of volume. We can move more energy and oxygen through the mouth than through the sinuses. So initially you may start to feel your lips getting dry or your mouth getting dry, but just stick with it. Your salivary glands will kick in, you'll self-correct. So as you breathe normally in and out through the mouth, we're going to add the second component, which is that the breath is diaphragmatic. So what do I mean by that? We have one main muscle of respiration, which is our diaphragm. It's right around the bottom of your rib cage. But we also have a number of secondary muscles of respiration that we often use without realizing it. And while they do the job of moving air in and out of the lungs, they don't do it as efficiently. And so for the same reason that we want to breathe in and out through the mouth, we want to push and pull this breath with the diaphragm because we can move more energy and oxygen with less effort. So put one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly. And just take a couple of breaths and pay attention to where you feel movement. Do you feel movement at the upper hand as your ribs lift and drop with inhale and exhale? Do you feel movement at the lower hand as your belly does the same? When we do diaphragmatic breathing, we want all of the movement to be at that lower hand. And that's as complicated as you need to be with it. It can sometimes help to visualize the air as you draw it into your body as traveling all the way down to the feet. So we're taking regular breaths in and out through the mouth, but using our diaphragm so that only the belly is rising and falling, and there's as little movement as possible in that upper hand. The third component of the breath is that it's circular. And what I mean by that is very simple. There's not an appreciable pause between an inhale and its following exhale, and the subsequent cycle of inhalation and exhalation. So one cycle of breath really rolls into the next in this very steady intake and exhale of breath. It can help to imagine waves crashing on a shore. So we're still breathing normally in and out through the mouth, utilizing our diaphragm to push and pull the breath, and not pausing between one cycle and the next. So it's more of a circular approach to breathing. The final component, and by far the most important, is that we focus on the inhale. So what do I mean by that? As you go through the breathing in this experience, I only want you expending energy to draw air into your body. Let the natural structure of your body push the air out. Believe me, it will go out on its own. And the reason we want to do this is it keeps us from hyperventilating. Most of the negative outcomes that people can have during a breath work is because they start to hyperventilate. So how do you know you're hyperventilating? Well, you may start to get cramping. That's a very typical sign in your calves, in your hands, in your feet, in your lips. You may get dizzy, but you're already laying down. In people with a history of psychosis and schizophrenia, it can trigger episodes. And that's one of the big reasons we want to not hyperventilate, other than it's just not good to hyperventilate. So when we focus on the inhale, we're bringing in more oxygen than we're pushing out CO2. Very simple. So we're taking these diaphragmatic breaths in and out through the mouth, only focusing on the inhale and not pausing between one cycle and the next. It's a very simple structure of breath. If at any point you do find yourself getting muscle cramps or starting to hyperventilate, try not to fight it. So if you're getting cramps in your feet, don't flex your toes. It'll just make it hurt. Relax into it. And just start to breathe normally, regardless of what stage in the journey you're at. Just breathe normally, and your body will re-equilibrate, and the cramping will stop. And when you find that you're comfortable in your body again, pick the breath back up. And this is true at any stage of the journey, whether you're hyperventilating or not. If it ever gets more intense than you want to deal with, stop doing the breath. Inversely, if you would like to make the experience deeper, then stay with the breath more strongly. So in this experience, the breath is both the engine, but it's also the brake. And as we do this cycle of breathing and the energy begins to gather in the body, we're going to go through a very distinct number of steps on this path of our journey. We're going to start with what's called the induction. The induction is a time of reflection. It's a time to quiet the mind, get comfortable in your body, relax into your space. And if you would like to set any intentions for this practice, this is when you would do that. We're still breathing normally. We're just letting go of the stresses of life, from the week, from relationships, from the world. And after we've sat in this space of reflection for a number of minutes, then you'll feel the tempo of the music really pick up. And we'll enter what's called the separation. The separation is the time when we really focus on the breathing, we stay with the breath, and we gather as much energy and oxygen in the body as we can to drive the rest of the journey. And after we've stayed with the breath during this separation process, again, you'll feel the tempo and the mood of the music change, and we'll enter into what's called the descent. So if during the separation you've been gathering energy, the descent is when you let go and let that energy flood through your body and come up against those blockages we talked about earlier and start to do the real work of a breathwork journey. And after we've been in the descent for a number of minutes, then eventually we'll enter the return, which is when we come back to ourselves and get grounded again and exit the journey.